Braveheart Workshops, inspiring connection. Restore. Dream. Getaway experiences. Love, live, and laugh. With Braveheart Workshops. Live now with Jill Reynolds.
The Connection Show. Restore, renew, and reconnect in community. Sponsored by Braveheart Workshops, live with Jill Reynolds. And joining me today is Chris Lipp. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you.
So tell us where you're from, Chris. Where are you located?
Calling from California right now. So it's nice, Jill, to connect here across the United States with you.
Awesome. Well, Chris, I'd love the audience to know just a little bit about you. Chris Lipp is an author of 2 books on communications and empowerment, and he lectures at Rice University. He leads workshops at innovation events for Microsoft, Mercedes-Benz, and Google. He is a world-renowned pitch coach and has worked with entrepreneurs to promote ideas and raise over $100 million in funding. Chris focuses on the behaviors and inner qualities that lead to a sense of empowerment. He is an advocate for those who aim to manifest themselves and make changes in the world. He co-founded Stanford Leaders in Communication, a program which supports Stanford students in effecting change at local and statewide policy levels. Chris is also a longtime meditator and spends 1 month every year at silent retreats. Well, I love hearing about that, Chris, and the audience, I'm sure, gets an opportunity to know a little bit more about you. So thank you for sharing yourself a little bit with us.
Well, I think, one of the main issues that we face in society today is a sense of disempowerment, a lack of power. And we've felt that maybe in the way our political system is going. What can I do? We have great ideas, and we're like, how can I even you, Jill? Like, you've got this great program. I think you have a new book. And it's like everybody, we have put our lives into our passion. And that's sort of what we're always told, isn't it? Follow your passion, follow your passion. But there's a couple challenges with that. And one of the challenges is, of course, doing it and figuring out what is your passion in the first place. And even after you've done that, you've got the next hurdle, which seems almost insurmountable and out of your control, which is now, how do I do anything once I've found my passion? You see a lot of authors, you see a lot of people who have done a lot of work, have written a lot of things, have put a lot of programs together, and nobody comes. And I think this is one of the big challenges. Jill, you've been very successful in this, but there are a lot of people out there who really do struggle, I think, to give empowerment to their values and to their passions.
Well, I totally agree with you, and I would definitely like to talk more on exactly that. However, before we get there, one of the things that I love about the Connection Show is connecting dots in life, Chris. And so it's really empowered me through doing some of this internal family systems work that I've done over the years of connecting the dots. And you being into meditation and silent retreats, being able to slow things down enough and be still and connect dots in life is imperative for empowering ourselves and connecting with others. So if you wouldn't mind, could you take us on a little bit of a journey of connecting your dots to your childhood and what it was like growing up for you? And then through that journey, what led you into what you're doing today, Chris?
I'd be very interested to hear your side of the story here. I think it is absolutely true that as children, we tend to have these experiences that really define us. And for me, those experiences really had to do around authority. I was raised with multiple, I had a couple parents, they divorced, they both remarried. And so I had a 4 adult figures, if you will, in my life. And some of those adult figures were very counter institutional, meaning they were very avant-garde, very individualistic. I can think of my dad, and taught me to really see the world from a unique perspective. On the other side, you have people who are the opposite, and they want a little more falling in line, as it were. And so I really dealt with these different energies in myself as a kid of having, on one hand, being encouraged to be self-expressive, but on the other hand, having, these some authority figures who were repressive. And so that really motivated me with internally to how can I find that power within myself to express myself? What is that? What does it mean, et cetera? And oddly, I studied engineering as my original background, but here I am in psychology and persuasion and empowerment research today, really looking at how does one give voice to themselves. I think you can see it very clearly with the problem that I put forward right at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And so with those, I like to call them and again, I've done a lot of my own personal work, and for me, I have found internal family systems one of the best modalities that I've ever discovered in doing that. And so what we've been doing actually on my Connection show on Wednesday nights, we did it for 2 weeks. Last week we took a break and did some improv comedy because everybody needed to laugh and sing some Christmas songs. But we did some legacy burden work where we did some ancestral work, taking a burden back generationally. And we worked, I think, on isolation for 2 weeks because of so many people feeling that. So growing up in a family, like you said, that had this kind of feeling of restriction per se, and all this this burden that was kind of started at a younger age then, and then going into engineering and switching. So what kind of switched for you? Where was that switch that made you look inside of Chris and even maybe switch your career from engineering into the field you're into today?
One of the wisest things I've ever heard is that your struggles are your path. We have this kind of illusion that life should be really easy, isn't it? Like, I'm going to go through my education, get a job, retire, and eventually, and then just like do entertainment for the rest of my life. I guess what else is, people don't, in their entertainment, their views of retirement. And life is not like that. Life is full of problems. I mean, look at just the world. We keep thinking that the world's going to be steady state, right? And then 2001 hits. And then no, now we've got it. And then COVID hits, right? In 2008, and COVID and all these other things happen. Things happen. That's existence. And for us, that's the truth as well. And in my own journey, I found that, I remember, years ago, somebody, one of my mentors said, I was going through a really tough time. And my mentor's like, you're going to look back on this and be thankful that this happened. And I was like, are you kidding? This is like the worst thing that's ever happened in my life. I want to like jump off a cliff. I'm like so upset. And, and then she was right. Looking back, if I think about just myself, it was those moments where I had the biggest upheaval and pain that actually created the most transformation. And so I really believe that we have this path laid out in front of us of challenges through our life, and every challenge is an opportunity in our response to that challenge to either grow or to stay static. For me, staying static was never an option because it meant that I would be vulnerable to experiencing the whole thing over again. And that was almost intolerable to experience those moments of pain in my life and those moments of loss, and to say, like, if I don't make a change, this is going to happen again. So let's not make a change. I mean, it made no sense, right? So I always put a lot of energy into my own personal transformation.
Well, it's imperative. And I think, winding down from 2020 and going into 2021 shortly here, where people have said, oh, 2020 has been the worst year ever. And, I had probably some of the most difficult things happen to me in September. Actually started in June. My beloved sister, on her 68th birthday, went to the hospital not feeling well to find out she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer that already spread to her liver and her spine. And she went to Stanford actually to get some chemo, and went to live with her daughter in Santa Cruz, and then she decided she wanted to go back to Colorado to pass, and she passed away on September 28th in her hotel en route back home. But in the interim of all of this, my beloved father of 94 years old had something weird happen to him. They took him in, infectious disease, looked him over, it wasn't COVID. And on his death certificate, they called it heart disease, but they still don't know. But my sister died on September 28th. My father died on September 30th. And 5 hours later, I was on the fifth floor of the hospital. He died on the third with COVID for 5 days with it in my lungs. And so, you could say, oh my gosh, that's so horrific. Oh my gosh. But Chris, it was like a weird type of rejuvenation of life and a rejuvenation of values and a rejuvenation of sitting back and sitting in my hotel room for a month as I was healing and waiting for funerals and selling my dad's home and his furnishings and moving my stepmom, that I had that time to just lay on my bed and curl up in a fetal position and cry like a baby and just infantilely just say, I just miss my daddy. I miss him and I loved him, and just connect that deep soul wound with myself. And if I would have been maybe in a different situation, I probably would have said, oh, dad died, and then powered through it and witness stopped. But because I got COVID and I had to stop, I was able to sit with the deep grief and pain and loss and come out stronger and just, and it's not like, oh boy, I'm so glad. No, that he died or my sister. No, but it was this strength. And I think the beauty of it is I've had moments just last week. I was driving in my car and I love listening to Christian music, and a song came on of one of my favorite Christian artists, and he did a rendition of Hark the Herald Angels Sing. And as the song came on, I said, who is that? He sounds like a drunken sailor in an Irish bar. His voice sounds horrible. And I started laughing and saying, oh, my sister would really get a kick out of that. And then I go, but she's not here. Oh, my dad would get a kick out of that, but he's not here. And then I just started to bawl. But it was good. It's good. And so what you said, many times we think that the pain and suffering is so horrific that we can't get through on the other end. But what do we do with that pain and suffering, I think, is what's imperative in life. Do we keep powering through and never sitting with it to heal? Or do we take, like you do, a 30-day silent retreat and turn off everything and just be still?
I tell you, like, my meditation was one of the best things that happened to me in my life, discovering that. And it wasn't a time of challenge. You bring up an interesting point too, which is, what is personal growth? I mentioned that these moments offer us the opportunity for personal growth. And in our society, I think there's a little bit of confusion around that, because I think some people could say, I had this terrible thing happen to me and I powered through it. So look how much better I am. I got better in my job or whatever. This almost myth, I call it the myth of Western society, is like that material gain or some sort of external gain is the way that we grow. And while developing skill sets and whatnot help us promote maybe our dream, I think the growth that you and I recognize is the internal growth. The internal transformation might even be a better word. What we're doing is we're trying to really reconnect with who we are at the deepest level. And when I think about, for example, like I've kind of created this story of like my growth cycle, the three kind of major events in my life that caused a lot of transformation. They had very different flavors. The first one was, I was still very young. I was a young adult, and it forced me to come up with, to decide what are my values, what are my beliefs, and how I'm going to go forward in life, rather than just be a product of society and their values. And the second one was almost a totally different one. It was what you're saying, which was like a surrender, and just recognizing that I don't have any control over so much of things, and just being open to that energy, right? And then the third one was really the integration of those two forces, because they had been polarized in myself before that.
That's great. So share with us now. So you've gone to college, you've gotten your degree as an engineer, and then what switch took place? You're now in engineering, and then what changes from sitting behind a desk, pencil to paper, engineering, logical thinking, to a whole shift from the logical side to the spiritual, emotional?
Well, I wouldn't even say at that point, like the shift that I had back then was really like, who am I? who do I want to be in this world? So it was really that independent value orientation. And is this the right path for me? And everybody has their own path. For me at the time, I was really diving into what do I care about and like, what are my top values? And then once I started to really have that work, I was like, well, am I in integrity to what I'm doing? And I think there's a lot of integrity to working responsibility. I think it's one of the pillars. At the same time, I recognized that I wanted to do, I felt, and this is not true for everybody, but for me, it was like, I want to put more of my energy that I'm working so hard in this company. I want to put it towards something meaningful to me and my dreams, not somebody else's dreams, because I didn't feel connected to that. I didn't feel connected to that corporate pathway. I think there are some great corporations, but if you want to do that path, you want to be aligned to the mission of the organization you're a part of. And I wasn't. So I left engineering, and I was really, how would you say, completely wrapped in this question of what does it mean? How does one be happy? Like that was it. And what are the values one has to have to be happy? Because every system, every religion has a set of values. Every society has a set of values. Every family, every group of friends and social environment, they all have these values. But if you follow one, I think just one blindly, there's going to be errors in it because nothing is complete. I think everything together is what makes completeness, right? And if you try to just isolate one piece, you'll always be sort of incomplete. And so I was like, okay, well, what is this? What are the values that can make us happy? And so I went and got a degree in psychology, and then that turned into working closer with people. And ultimately, communication, I realized, was really the gateway to promoting ideas. Once you had unidentified your values, if you have a passion or if you want to express yourself, how do you do that? So that's how I got into this path.
So tell me then, so how have you used this new knowledge and help us to understand the different dynamics? As I was reading your bio that you've authored 2 books. So talk about those 2 books you've authored on communication empowerment. What are they called? And what's the essence of them?
I mean, the first one's the startup pitch. So it's just helping entrepreneurs promote their ideas. The second one's called Magnetic, how great leaders persuade and inspire. And it's how you become magnetic so people follow you. Now that's the point that I really wanted to bring this conversation up is like, here we're doing a lot of talking about me and my background, but I don't actually think that's important to a lot of people. And so I that's, for me, that's valuable. But I think a lot of errors that we make when we communicate is that we talk about ourselves without recognizing that most people don't care about us. They care about what's in it for them. They care about what's valuable for them. And so, if you think about it, if I were to ask you, Jill, like, what is the most persuasive word in the English language? What would you say?
Persuasive word in the language. That's a really tough question. That's a tough one. I'm sitting here, my brain's, fluttering through.
Let me share it with you.
Yeah, because the one thing that comes to mind, but it's not one word. But for me, what's been pervasive for me with people is a woman taught me this years ago, and she became a highly successful sales rep, making $300,000 to $400,000 a year. And she taught me, and she was like 10 years younger than me, that when you're speaking to someone, you want to do a needs assessment and learn what the person's needs are and find out more about them and their needs than yourself. And by that, it's very persuasive, because by you doing an assessment of someone else, you're connecting. So my persuasiveness is connection.
I mean, we both value connection. I mean, I was doing a workshop in Bali a few years back, and I was staring into somebody's eyes for like 10 minutes. That was the exercise. And at the end, we were like, well, then we were really vulnerable to each other. And she's like, what are you doing? Or what's your interest in life? And I'm like, connection. I think that is fundamental to. So
would that have been your word? What's your persuasive? My persuasive word is connection, I guess.
Well, it's the most persuasive word in the English language is the word you.
You. What are you? Yeah, and you're asking them about you. Well, it's funny you mentioned that about the I, because my husband and I, we've been married 20 years, but we dated 7. And believe it or not, we met. at an intensive codependency retreat. And the very first experiential exercise we did at this retreat was, they said, just find someone sitting next to you. It didn't have to be the same sex. It could be opposite or whatever, opposite or the same. And just stand side by side to them, non-verbally, and stare into their eyes and make a decision who's the leaver or the stayer in a relationship. And so the man sitting next to me, I asked him to be my partner, and we stood face to face. And as you're doing this, if you're really into it, you don't even know there's other people in the room. And there were like 30 of us in the room, so 15 people doing this. And we were staring into each other. And all of a sudden, I hear the therapist say, at some time, someone has to make a decision who's the leaver. And at that moment, my husband said, I guess I will. And his eyes left. So we had been staring for like 15 minutes because we're both stayers. And as soon as his eyes left, I started bawling hysterically because it took me back to the day that my father had gone to work and my mother had moved all of our furniture out of our home into an apartment because she was having an affair, and her leaving my father and me sitting there crying hysterically because I wanted my dad. And so this exercise, who's the leaver, who's the stayer, my dad was always the stayer until he couldn't. So when she said someone has to make a decision, he had no choice because she left. And so it just spiraled this whole emotional thing for me. And thus, who would know? 7 years later, I married the man. So I got married to the man I did the exercise with. But that connection with the eyes is so impactful. And one other thing, and then I want to go back to you, that I did that was so unbelievable. On my burden release retreats that I've done with Dr. Laura Wood, a world-renowned drama therapist, we would always do these events, and each person would have an opportunity to release a burden. And I became so intuitive on these weekends when we would do them, Chris, that I would never come to the event with any preconceived idea. So I would never go there saying, when I get to this weekend, I want to work on X, Y, Z. I would always show up with no intention. That's a good one for people to hear today. When have you showed up in life with no intention? I think that's a powerful thought for 2021, because I would show up with no intention, and so I would sit through the weekend, and then it would be my turn to get up and do my own work. And I remember I was the only one that would have my cell phone because I had to keep time. And so I remember sitting through the whole weekend of 14 people, and it was my turn to do my work. And I saw myself walk into the center of the room, sit on a chair, and bring my cell phone with me to sit down. And as I did, and Laura says, Jill, what are you going to work on? I said, I'm going to work on busyness, how I use social media and my cell phone and texting and everything else so that I don't have to connect with anyone. And if I stay busy, then I don't have to realize how lonely and isolated I am in the world. So I just sat there like this, rocking with my cell phone. And thus I did my work on how I disconnect with busyness. When I finished this an hour later, Chris, all of a sudden, I stopped doing my work and I looked around the room, and there were 15 of us, and I had been at the event for at least 30 hours. And as soon as I did this burden release, I could see every participant's eyes. In other words, I was so disconnected from my busyness that I didn't know anyone else was there.
Let me ask you, so, I mean, there's a couple of things that come up from this story, but I think the first and the kind of most counterintuitive thing is you said you went with no intention. And what did that allow you and what allow other people to experience as a result?
Well, going with no intention is, it's not me coming into that space saying, I'm going to use my head instead of my whatever's going on in my body. I'm going there like with brain thoughts of, this is what I got to work on.
If you have an intention.
Yeah, when I have an intention. And so I switched, and it's kind of funny because I didn't even know where this came from, but it had been in my head for years. And I actually just Googled this week. And when I went to a church in Chicago called Willow Creek, and I didn't even know where this song came from, but there was a song that I remember hearing in my brain that kept saying, Holy Spirit, take control. Put a finger on
Mm.
anything I do that grieves you, anything I do that doesn't please you. Holy Spirit, take control. And that's the whole song. No other words. It's just you repeat it over and over. And it's funny, Chris, I found myself all of a sudden doing this spiritual shift inside of me at these events. And every time it was going to be my turn to do my burden release, I would close my eyes and I'd say that. Put a finger on anything I do that doesn't please you, anything that grieves you, take control. And so I'd step into that space, and all of a sudden, one word would come into my mind, and I don't believe it was my word. I feel like, for me, I call it God, the Holy Spirit, would give me my word, and that word was busyness. So that's having no intention. Getting out of yourself and letting the spirit world, whoever
Yes.
it is, God, whoever your spiritual being is with, take over inside of you and transform your mind, your body, and your soul so that you can truly heal and be present.
I mean, that's what I get out of meditation is stepping out of, in some way, stepping out of the head and letting things arise. I did many years ago, I met a couple energy healers. I was doing a workshop with them. And at the end of it, I stick around and we talked a little bit. And I was like, you guys are doing energy healing and you've done body work. And what would you say has been the most impactful practice that you've ever done in healing you? And one of them, she looked at me, she said, I think it's actually dream analysis. I was like, what? And the other one's like, yeah, you hear these expert healers and then out of like left field, dream analysis. And when given what you just said, right, it makes sense because in dreams, that's the moment where your consciousness shuts off and the unconscious starts to communicate with you essentially, right? So it's bringing up this information. And if you can really understand that, and I've had dreams where I had a dream just earlier this week, which was, the dream was that, I needed to clean up house, and the house wasn't messy yet, but it was getting messy. And so I was like, okay, so the next day I did 2 hours of meditation and then it was clean. I had better dreams. So getting that consciousness out of the way, and to your point of intention, I actually am agreeing with you. I agree with you in that. I would voice that to anybody listening. If we're going to do an event or we're going somewhere to transform, any intentions we create, any plans we create come from the person we are before the transformation. And therefore those plans will constrict our ability to transform.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And have you seen, you live in California right now. Did you ever go to see or watch at home the animated Pixar film Inside Out?
Yeah, of course. Great movie.
Great movie. So if you, for a moment, Chris, break this down, are you familiar yourself, Chris, with Internal Family Systems by Dick Schwartz? Do you know that? Have you
Vaguely.
studied? Okay.
I haven't studied it though.
So you would love it. You would absolutely love it. So if you get a chance, rewatch the movie, do yourself a favor and watch it again Inside Out, because it's definitely based on internal family systems. So for those of you who haven't watched it, it's a story about this little girl named Joy who lives in Minnesota, and she's an avid hockey player, really popular, and then her dad gets a promotion and moves to California. And so she moves there excited, but then she gets into her new school and finds out she really doesn't connect with any friends, and the hockey team isn't the same as at home. And so all of a sudden she has this overwhelming feeling of sadness come over. And her mother says to her, Joy, don't let Daddy see your sadness, because it'll make him feel bad that he's moved us away from your friends. So Joy learns to stuff sadness down really deep, and it becomes an exiled part of her. And so in the interim, in the words of Dick Schwartz, he calls our systems the protectors and managers, the firefighters, and then the exiled parts. And so in Joy's life, Joy became her manager, her protector. She went around and everyone thought she was filled with joy. But then her firefighters that came in became despair and anger and resentment. And so as those firefighters that were trying to, just keep the fire going so Joy would walk around and everyone thought she was cool, her exiled part, sadness, kept going deeper and deeper away, and as it did, her whole world was collapsing. And so if you put it into the concept of today, it would be equivalent to people then getting so depressed they'd commit suicide or get on drugs and alcohol, but the despair kept getting so much. And
I want to just share something, Jill, because this is one of the things I have noticed this summer as we've gone through COVID, right? There's been a lot of struggle and stress that most of us have dealt with. And, I have, thanks to my meditation practice, I have generally been extremely happy. But, I too have struggled with this, like everybody does, right? And what I've noticed in that struggle is I when I was young, I used to feel like there was something missing inside me. And I cured that, I healed that. But that feeling has come up a little bit again. I'm like, what is this feeling? This interesting feeling. I remember it when I was young, and because I was having it and it was coming and going, I could actually watch what was happening at the moment that it would arise or dissipate. And it wasn't that there was a hole. I mean, that's the wrong way to describe it, because what's actually happening is you're turning off a part of yourself, or you're actually looking away, or exiling a part. And so that it's when people feel not whole, right? We feel not whole, and then we struggle to find somebody outside or something outside to fill us. But actually, we are whole. We've just, the word shadow, of course, right? You've shadowed a part of it. And so to find wholeness again, you are whole. So you just need to look inward and pierce the shadows that are hiding yourself.
Well, and the beauty, though, Chris, of internal family systems, and why I've loved it so much, because I've done 38 years of my own healing and recovery, done Gestalt, again, cognitive, DBT, CBT, you name every acronym, EMDR, I've done everything. And it wasn't until I discovered parts work that I discovered, as Joy did in this movie, in her sadness was exiled, until all of a sudden she just stood back and she said to sadness, I'm going to let you come out, and I want to learn about you, and creatively and curiously and connectively ask you what you need. What do you need, sadness? And sadness shared, I need someone to hear that I really miss my friends and blah, blah, blah. And it needed to be seen instead of exiled. So as soon as sadness could be seen, it was able to unblend from joy. And as I say, go to the beach, play in the sand, relax. And then, if Joy needed it again, she could go to the beach and say, hey, sadness, I'm kind of needing you today. Would you come back and kind of reconnect with me? And so I think what's happened to most of us in life, Chris, is we've grown up with this, and unfortunately, and I'm a strong Christian, unfortunately, you hear this a lot in the spiritual realm of people who are very spiritual. They walk around in, please, no disgrace at all, or to the words here that I've heard from you, is they'll walk around with this feeling, telling the world that I'm happy every day, or nothing's wrong, or just pray a little bit more, or surrender, or fast, or meditate, do this more. And what the truth is, they may just need to slow it down and let that part come out that's like being exiled, like, wow, I'm feeling stressed today.
Absolutely.
Stress, hi, could you come out and share a little bit while you're there? And then let it have a conversation, unblend with it. And I love a beach that's deserted. So I lined up all my social distanced, and this is way before social distancing, my lawn chairs and my sand pails and my suntan lotion, and I put all my little parts on the beach when I want to unblend and let them chill. And then if I need them, I just call them back and say, hey, anxiety, come in. I need you for like an hour or two. Or, hey, eating disorder, I feel like being a little bingy today, and now I'm done with you. Would you go back? And when I've done this, it frees up all that space inside to have moments of joy.
That's what we want.
Or moments of happiness.
That's what we want.
Because I don't believe in this world we can have hours and days of joy and happiness. I just don't believe that is possible, because we're living daily, and parts are stirring up daily if we're existing. Otherwise, we're dead. I'd love it to be every day we're like filled with amazing happiness, but Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't. I think you just, unless you're sitting there like you've had the privilege, unless we can sit at a silent retreat every single day of our life.
It's definitely not happy. Well, it really comes down to how you define happiness.
Yes.
If you define happiness as this temporary state of like, everything's going great, it's temporary, and you're ultimately going to be unhappy because that will always change. One of the tenets is that all things change, regardless of the philosophy. So you really have to define happiness as wholeness. And if you can find that wholeness, then you'll have the ups, you'll have the downs, but underneath all of that, there will be something that you can call steady.
Yep. So you've authored these 2 books and you've led workshops. So talk about these workshops that you've led a little bit, Chris. Tell me about them.
I could, but I think we're on a much more interesting topic because, as I listen to you talk, one of the things I noticed is I have much interest in this idea of there's a masculine way to heal and there's a feminine way to heal. And the masculine way, the way people say I do the masculine, right? And I guess that shouldn't be a shock, but like what I do is I sit and I allow. So there's a piece, things come up. And with equanimity, that would be the word that they use in my practice. With equanimity, you observe it, but you don't react to it. I have a very close friend who I think she says many things that are similar to what you do, which is you interact with it. You give it voice. You take care of it. You meet its needs. And I think that maybe the inner family work is more similar to that method. Mm-hmm. So I just always found it fascinating that there are these 2 domains of creating more wholeness.
Well, what I find it interesting, and I appreciate that, is for the audience to know, I had no idea who Chris was, and I belong to a women's prosperity network, and a friend of Chris's was on one of my networking Zoom calls this last couple weeks, and I had indicated that I do my podcast show, and I said, I love to interview people so that they have a voice in the world and so they can share who they are and what they do for the world to get to know them. And so she said, I'd like to be on your show. And so she reached out by email and said she'd be, and then she sent Chris's bio, which I thought very interesting because I thought it was going to be her. And she said, I really think that this person you should interview. So I'm one of those types of people, Chris, that truly believe that nothing at all, my little screen moved and my button came up and I'm trying to get it to go away on the screen. Nothing in this world happens by accident. I just do not believe that at all. Mm. And I always believe that 2 people are brought together for a divine purpose. And so Chris and I never met, didn't know a thing about each other, was just given his bio and said, here, interview Chris. And so he's on my show and don't know not much about him, didn't even have a clue what he did. And so, so Chris, with that, when I keep going back and forth with wanting to know a little bit about what you do, there's a twofold reason, because I believe that there's a reason you and I have met and we're supposed to stay connected for whatever reason. But I also like to divert you to you for one reason, is I really believe the Connection Show is about letting the universe know who you are too, so that as they hear this interview, they might say, wow, I heard Chris and he does this, this, and this. There's a reason I'd love to reach out to Chris. So help the audience, if you wouldn't mind, besides the fact that you are very intuitive, wise, have a happiness in your life. You do silent retreats and meditate. I'm still trying to grasp a little bit for my brain, so that maybe there might be a time we might partner, who knows, what these workshops involve. And I've not heard much in my past on the word pitch coach.
Oh, yes, that's where I started.
And I was in sales for 38 years, so I've heard, give your sales pitch and all that. So help the audience, if you wouldn't mind, because you're a world-renowned pitch coach, help us to understand what that terminology means today.
There are a lot of people out there who have great ideas, and if they don't get the funding they need to back their companies, in this case, those ideas die. And if you meet these people, like, you yourself may be one, right? They're working so hard, and they've done all this energy. In fact, one of the things I really always, that hurts me, it's kind of ironic. I don't understand why, but when I see a restaurant close, I feel bad because I know somebody had made that restaurant as part of their dream, and now it had failed. And I really have a hard time with that. It may be because my dad was an entrepreneur growing up, and there were times where I watched him fail. I don't know the reason. And so I want to ensure that people who have these ideas can present themselves. That's what pitching is, right? Presenting themselves persuasively so that they can get the funding they need, the investment they need to build the company up and really make their dream come true. I mean, to put it lack of a better word. So that's what I do. Is I did a lot of research on that. Through my own failures, I actually learned a bit as well, being part of a startup before that, and ultimately ended up finding out, hey, this is what people are doing, and there were a lot of information back when I wrote the book. I started the book in 2011, 2012, and there were not a lot of resources on how to do this effectively. The resources were actually wrong, and so did a lot of research, found out, okay, this is what it is, wrote a book on that, and then started to work with individuals. And ultimately, I've helped people raise over $100 million in investment. So, yeah, I mean, the number is nice. I guess it gives you a little credibility, but I think the value is really that there are people out there who are more successful and who are living the dream that they've wanted to live. I hope that they're doing that.
So you've been able to do some events with Microsoft and Mercedes-Benz and Google where you,
right.
Were you the ones then, were you the one then speaking at the events, teaching the people in the audience how to be more innovative and how to pitch their... Okay. So
yeah,
I try to connect the dots, and when you read someone's bio, you got to read between the lines, and I like to dig deeper.
Well, Jill, I mean, I started as a pitch coach. That is what I'm known for. That's where I get the majority of my business. But the fact of the matter is, I actually feel that there's a deeper need now in society that I'm trying to fulfill, and that's really where I opened up this interview, which is this problem of ultimately disempowerment. And one way that we can empower ourselves with the right language and communication skills, but there's many other aspects to that I've really been looking into recently.
And I'm glad you said that, because I just want to divert on that for just a moment, because you said you've got this new vision. So I'm gonna share with you as you create this new vision.
Yes.
As a 66-year-old that's been around the block a few times. I think I am, in many ways. I'm a very non-judgmental person. In many ways I am. Some things we all judge on something. But I've been very triggered this year with a lot of words that...
How so?
And I'll tell you why. I just feel like we've created in 2020...
politics?
Well, not only politics, it's deeper, way deeper than... Politics is that protector or manager. I'm looking at the exiled part. There's a lot of... You can use the big word politics, and that's just a manager, and just like, you throw that out and everyone gets like this. I'm talking deeper, and I think where mine comes from, I'm going to divert for a moment, and then you'll see. But I think this will maybe be helpful for yourself in 2021 as well as the audience. I grew up in a family, like I said, lots of dysfunction. My grandfather, who was 15 years older than my grandma, was from Greece. My grandma was 15, he was 30. She was from Louisiana, he was from Greece, and he opened up a Greek restaurant. They divorced in the 50s, remarried another Greek woman. When we had family gatherings, everyone would speak around. The ancestors and kids that knew how to speak Greek would be in the dining room all talking Greek, and the English-speaking kids would be in the other room. There was never connection. And I grew up feeling very, very judgmental. I said I'm not judgmental. You could call it racism. You could call it discriminatory, of foreigners who would come to the United States and not speak English. So my whole life growing up, every time I'd go to a restaurant or somewhere that people were not speaking English, it brought up in my spirit, ugh, you're not you're not making me feel like I'm part of what you're saying. And I felt disconnected and hurt because it's my legacy burden. So as 2020 went on, and the racial divide and the Black Lives Matter and the politics and the riots and everything hit and all these words came out, the more I heard words like, we've got to do this, or we have to be empowered, or we have to this, the more I was like, no, stop. I don't have to do anything. I can sit back and choose to listen inside of me that resonates, that feels right for me. Be kind to others. Not be condemning. Not like put a blind eye and say, I don't want to hear your story. But I still want to sit with myself in 2021 and know I still have my own individual feelings and thoughts, and my burdens are my burdens and your burdens are yours. So I've just gotten triggered severely in 2020 with so many words that have been thrown at us. So I'm going to divert that to you with 2021, if that makes any logical sense to you. So I think going into 2021, I'd like to go into it with no more words, like defining all of us. Like, I don't want to start 2021 with defining. Does that make any sense to you at all?
It does. What? Take a breath.
Yeah. I know I have a lot of energy around that. You can tell.
No, I wasn't saying it for you. I was saying it, I think just that because I wanted to give this space for anybody listening, because I have a yoga teacher who just posted on Facebook probably yesterday, I think it was, and he said, I was sitting at the side of the river, the Ganga in India, and when I was younger, I used to talk to the rocks, and he's like, I put my hand on them, and of course there were no words because a rock doesn't speak that cognitive language, but we had a communication. And now that may sound super crazy. I've had that communication with trees, frankly. I've gone and stood in front of a tree and there is something that is, I call it an energy, call it what you will. There's some form of communication that is different than the words flowing. I just think that's something to recognize.
I agree. When I went to Aruba, this is my Aruba picture, by the way, Chris. And when I went to Aruba last year, I am not a morning person at all. After I had my car accident, was disabled, my body got used to going to bed when I felt like it and waking up when I felt like it. But when I went to Aruba, my holistic doctor said, wake up when the sun's coming up. Go outside and ground your feet in the sand and look into the sun until it rises, and you'll get enough vitamin D for the whole day. So I followed that for a week. And as I did, I brought outside this beautiful meditation that I had put together, breathing in positive words and breathing out the opposite of them. And so I'd go outside with my Bose speaker and breathe in my thing and ground myself in the sand. And as I did, this little pier back here, fishing pier, the first day I started to do that with the meditation, school is in the fish, this flock of seagulls, and I love seagulls from Jonathan Livingston Seagull. This flock of seagulls came flirt like this, landing on the pier with their little feet going crazy. And it was about 12 or 15 of them. And as they landed, they heard my morning meditation. And one by one, Chris, they lined up behind each other and slowly sat down and laid down, still listening to my meditation. And as it ended, one by one, slowly got up, not like this, and they soared into the sky. And I observed this every morning, and it was just so beautiful. And I think that's kind of that vision I have for all of us, is let's let our feet slow down and maybe line up aligned and sit down quietly, look into each other's eyes, and let's connect more in the next year and hear each other's story instead of figuring out what we need to do to each other to make each other better. Because I think we're all divinely better already. It's like, but we don't take the time to realize how divinely better we are.
I think this is a wonderful note to end it on. And I will share an echo of the research side to what you said, which is that when you listen to somebody, when you not talk, but when you listen to somebody and hear what they have to say, even if it's the opposite opinion, right? Half of America doesn't agree with half of America right now. When you listen, the other person, after they've spoken, will reciprocate by listening back. And the result is that you are both heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know, I love that. And I want to go into one more thing with you because I have my words. So my words are at the beginning of my connection show, you heard me say the connection show, Restore, Renew, and Reconnect in Community Live. And so those words, I love to look up definitions, Chris. So restore means to bring back to a previous situation and reinstate. So, Chris, what would you like to restore in your life, bring back in 2021 and reinstate?
Restore my my equanimity with the world.
And renew, Chris, means resume after an interruption. What would you like to resume or renew after it being interrupted?
Can you repeat that one more time?
The word renew, according to the dictionary, means to resume after an interruption. What would you like to renew in 2021?
To renew means to assume that something has stopped. It's hard to say that I have stopped anything that I would renew.
Okay.
But if I were to come up with something really hard, renew my travel around the world. Renew visiting people, renew seeing faces.
Okay. And that kind of goes to the next one. It's funny because these words are so closely aligned, but they definitely have different meanings. And then the last one is reconnect in community, which says reconnect means reestablish a bond of communication or emotion. So is there something that you in 2021 that you would reconnect, reestablish as far as communication or emotions that maybe you haven't had a chance to do in 2020?
Well, I will tell you, I am looking forward to reconnecting deeper with myself through another silent meditation retreat.
Awesome. And I want you to know, because you don't know this about me, as I did lots of silent retreats. They were never a month. I wish I would have. I was a single, never married mom for 17 years, but occasionally I would go to a really lovely Catholic retreat center in Chicago called the Cenacle with the Catholic nuns and go. And people know me, Chris, as being a very talkative person. You can tell by meeting me. But the truth is from birth till I was date raped at 14, I was a very nonverbal, quiet, lost child and barely spoke a word. And it wasn't until I was raped that I got empowered and never quit talking. But people kind of laugh when they hear that in a sense that know me because they know me as being a chatterbox. But internally, my internal self is very introverted and I love going on retreats where no one talks. I love it. I love it. And everybody, we'll have to do one. I'll plan one for 2021 once the travel restrictions. I'll put one together, Chris, and definitely you'll have to come because I have some really amazing places. I found an amazing 21 room villa in the Dominican, 4 hours away from Punta Cana, right off of Raycon Beach, and Raycon Beach is listed in Traveler's Nest as one of the top 10 beaches in the world. And I know the owner, and then this amazing place in Aruba. So anyway, last but not least, if someone told you today that you had to delete all of your apps on your cell phone, but you could keep only 2, what are your 2 must-haves?
I was feeling like, wow, that's wonderful. I can delete all the apps. I wouldn't even keep two. If I was going to go the whole way, I would go the whole way and get rid of the phone. But if I had to, but there is this one app, and I really want to share it. I think everybody really should pay attention to it. It's probably the most, I would say now it's become the most important app on my phone. It is called the mobile calling. You can actually dial people and then talk to them. It's amazing. So I recommend that app.
I love that one because I hate texting. I hate it. Texting should only be, I'm running 10 minutes late. See you soon. That's all it should be. It shouldn't be a conversation. Never, ever text for a conversation. Anyway, what is one fun fact about you?
Oh man, I get all the hard questions at the end. One fun fact about me? Probably that like I've lost humorous speech contests. I guess that's not fun. That's like the opposite of fun, isn't it?
You've lost humorous speech contests.
I used to do public speaking, and I used to compete in speech contests. And so I lost a humorous speech contest, which should tell you that I am not funny.
I like that. So you don't have a real great sense of humor. So I guess we'll have to pull you down from analytical thinking and get you to come on my Connection Zoom gatherings, which I meet on Wednesday nights. And we did it this last Wednesday, and we did improv. I learned improv from Dr. Laura Wood, who is that drama therapist. She's great at it. And my most favorite, and I'll have to do it with you, Chris, is improv with the hitchhikers. One's the hitchhiker and the other's the driver. And so we'll have to definitely do some play therapy together.
Sounds good.
So I'm going to let the audience know how to reach you. Your bio's up here, and I love it. He's got his suit on and his tie on, and his hair's all buffed, and wow. So this is a whole different Chris that we don't see on the screen here, Chris. It's great to see.
I'm glad I've aged so well.
No, I just love, yeah, I got my T-shirt on, and then you dress me up, and is that the same person? So that's Chris. But it's a privilege to get to know you, Chris, and I hope that, you might get out to Branson. I don't know if you feel like coming in February. We're going to do our Fiercely Faithful book launch conference. We launched on Tuesday, and in 10 hours we became a #1 international best-selling book published around the world. And I think we sold in 10 hours like 20,000 Kindle copies just after launch. So I'm looking forward to our conference in Branson. So thanks a lot, Chris. It's been a privilege getting to know you.
Thank you, Jill. Likewise.
Bless you.
Thanks for joining us on The Connection Show. Let's connect now. We can dream together to renew, restore, and reconnect with wellness in our life and community. To enhance connection, join us in the Zoom Connection Gathering Tribe on Wednesday evenings. The Zoom Connection Gathering Tribe is an easy and practical way for everyone to meet up, gather, and feel welcomed and accepted. To join us, go to braveheartworkshops.com. Then click on the podcast tab and the Zoom Connection Tribe tab. On that page, go to the Facebook page called The Connection Show Gathering Tribe and register to join our Facebook group. We post secure passwords each week in the group so you can log in safely. We meet on Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 o'clock Central, 6 o'clock Mountain, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for 1.5 hours with great topics, laughter, and connection. See you on Wednesday evenings. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.